A reaction podcast to a YouTube video by Connecting the Dots. It's about Tesla's positioning in the Optimus market. I think it's a good episode. The link's in the show notes. There's some clickbait and stuff like that, but that's okay. I think overall he did a very good job in depicting the different stages of the humanoid robotics market and how Tesla is positioned. Now, the reason I'm reacting to this is actually because I think I got inspired in thinking about this once again. I mean, we've been thinking about this for the last, I would say, at least year and a half more seriously. We spent a lot of time also on the academic side trying to understand what's happening on the science side, the academic front, papers. We read a lot of scientific papers. We also look at the industry, and of course, we also try to understand what Tesla is doing, even though Tesla has been a bit more stingy with information about what they're doing, and that's actually part of the podcast of what Connecting the Dots is saying, is that maybe Tesla was a bit too generous in helping the industry understand what they're doing, and then people are catching up. So let me first give an explanation of what they're saying, and then my reaction. This is not even on podcast. It's March 17, 2025. This is Krim Delco. For the year, we're down 41%. The market's down 7%. We're underperforming by 34%. The drawdown comes mainly from Tesla and also from NVIDIA. And we're unfortunately in a situation right now where we have to stick through a tough time without having a lot of fundamental positives. We have a lot of potential, but not too many fundamental positives. What I mean by that is that very often in the Tesla story, there's two vectors, right? You have the potential, you have the fundamentals, and then you can kind of look at it as a square. You either have good potential and good fundamentals, you have good potential, bad fundamentals, good fundamentals, bad potential, and so on and so forth. Right now, I would say we have definitely good potential, but we have bad fundamentals, and the potential is being questioned with people like the Connecting the Dots video, where some of the big upside in the Optimus market actually is being questioned. And what I mean with not so good fundamentals is we have lots of financings, 0% financing, 1% financing, which means that demand is probably not as strong as we thought it is, or not as strong as we hope it should be for Tesla. And that's not just the Model Y refresh. I think there's definitely a demand problem, whether that is a recession macro-driven, whether it's political-driven, that remains to be seen. But there's definitely lots of, there's not too much to be excited about on the fundamental front. We have margin pressure, volumes aren't growing as fast, sales are not growing as fast. I guess the only positive thing about the fundamentals is, on the one hand, we have the energy business, which is doing really well. And then we have FSD, which is rolling out globally, China and the US. And that's certainly a positive. We're very excited about FSD. We're using it ourselves, so it's very good. And let's use this as a segue now to the story here, and that is Optimus. And let's start with FSD, because that's part of the story. So the way we saw the potential for Optimus has always been through the lens of FSD. So Tesla has solved the first at-scale real-world AI problem. In other words, Tesla has solved the first at-scale robotics problem in the new area of AI. So what we mean with that is that we've had robotics for a long time, but we've had sort of the KUKA robots and the Fanuc robots and all that stuff, right? And the new area of robotics is a flexible, learnable machine that adapts to the environment. So that's what we mean with new area of robotics. And in this new area of robotics, the first at-scale product that is available to customers is the Tesla FSD. So in that sense, they have solved the problem, and they're selling at scale. They're actually making real money. And that's a good thing, and that's part of the reason why the stock is very highly valued given its fundamentals. There is not just potential, but there is also real evidence for having solved the problem. Ashok and his team have done a phenomenal job, and prior to him, Karpati and his team. because what they've done is created a data pipeline that collects the data, quasi an internet of driving, and that we can use that data a little bit like GPT used the internet data to solve the language interaction with robots. The Tesla has solved the driving interaction through the internet of driving, that is the Tesla fleet that drives billions of miles. So that has been solved to the point where customers are using FSD with a 99% safety guarantee. It's still supervised because it's not 99.999. But given where we were just a year ago or 2 years ago, we're incredibly excited about the product. So having said that, now the question that connecting the dots raises, and that we have been studying for a while now, is, okay, does this translate into other AI products? And one of the answers is yes, it translates into Optimus, which is a humanoid robot. Now, what connecting the dots does really well is kind of dissecting the Optimus robot situation in sort of parts of the problem, right? So you have actuators, so you have the mechanics of the robot, then you have the data collection, learning side, algorithmic side, then you have the scaling side, and then you have the business side. So there's different vectors on which Optimus can succeed. And what he's doing in his video is kind of dissecting all of them and showing that Tesla doesn't have a competitive advantage in nearly none of them. On top of that, he's adding the cherry on the pie, which is that because of Doge, the CEO is distracted, and we actually need Elon time here, because what he's saying is that there is real competition. This is not like the EV space where for a long time nobody was competing. This is a tough space because we're not really in disruption mode. And I'm going to explain what I mean with that. This is not my interpretation. We're not in disruption mode. We are actually in a very competitive market. So let's go step by step what we think about this. So let's start with the actuator mechanics side. Now, on this front, I would say I wouldn't be concerned too much either way, because that's not going to be the competitive advantage. The same way that the components that Tesla is using for its cars are never going to be the competitive advantage. What is a competitive advantage, of course, is the assembly of those components, the engineering, and the at-scale production, which is, we believe, actually going to be a competitive advantage. So whether there are cheap components available in China or not, I don't think that's going to make or break the Optimus product. In fact, I think Tesla needs at-scale production of components, the same way they needed at-scale production of many of the components that go into the Tesla cars. So on that front, we're comfortable. Now, the fact that they are fully integrated, I think is still important, but that doesn't mean that you have to produce everything. And what fully integrated means in the Tesla context is always, it's kind of like Apple, where we have hardware and software fully integrated. So for example, the chips that make the decisions at the inference time when the robot is actually operating, they might be produced by Tesla. They might not be produced by Tesla. That remains to be seen. We don't know the details. The integration of the software with the hardware, whether we have memory on chip, whether we have some sort of operating system with maybe an inference computer that deals with all the little actuators and chips on the robot, or maybe we even have a cloud-based solution. Let's say in a factory setting, we could have the robots being pretty light in terms of software and have a cloud-based solution. So there are a lot of different avenues towards how to actually execute this problem. And I think what's really important here, and that's going to be our conclusion, but I'm going to bring it now, is iteration. So that's where we agree with the connecting the dots. This is one of the takeaways that we totally agree with. What Optimus requires is a lot more iteration. By the way, we even think that FSD requires that iteration around the application and the business, and also the supply chain and the production, like, because it depends. let's say if you choose to start with an Optimus robot that is factory-based, you might actually have a software solution that is cloud-based in the factory setting. So if it's geofenced in the factory, if you go for a fully flexible, can do anything anywhere type robot, you have to have edge devices. You have to solve edge problems, a little bit like Qualcomm and companies like that, or Apple, where you really have an edge device that needs to, for example, have the battery life that is required for something like that. You don't want to have to change a battery every 2 hours and things like that. So there is more iteration required, and that's why we believe Elon time is necessary. Because I think the main value added of Elon Musk right now for any of his companies is to be the sort of the policeman on the crossing that shows the direction. So he's, whenever there's a fork in the road, whenever there's, okay, should we do this or that, that's where his strength is. His strength is also in understanding what is required and also what is to be taken away. Think of taking away LiDAR and camera. Taking away LiDAR and radar in order to focus on camera. That's a big decision, which I think will pay a lot of dividend going down the road, because they're going to be the low-cost producer in full self-driving cars. So again, we believe that the actuator side of things and is not going to make or break it, but the full integration is. Now let's talk a little bit about software and algorithms. Now, we've seen over the last 2 years amazing advances in software algorithmic solutions coming from academia and also industry. Pi-0, one of the papers we discussed recently coming out of Sergey Levin et al. Certainly one of the big, I think, endeavors here, which is sort of an open source foundation model for robotics. We've seen RTX by Google. We've seen lots of papers in the robotic space going in that direction, which is foundation model, general purpose algorithms that can solve several tasks. So we're going away from task specific towards general purpose, which is kind of going away from, it's the same direction that the language space took. We had task specific language models such as translation, interaction with call center and stuff like that, towards a general purpose GPT type models. So we have the same development also on the robotic side, and I think that's phenomenal, and I think that is opening up lots of avenues for applications. What Connecting the Dots says really well is, I think there's a sentence there that I like a lot, which is the robot is going to be the embodied manifestation of large language models. So you because of the large language model revolution, if you will, or the evolution to where we are today, we can actually interact with robots really well. What that means is, excuse me, one of the problems that has been, I think, overhanging the space has always been the interaction. How do you actually interact with the robot? How do you explain a machine what it should be doing, right? And in other words, how do you add semantics to the equation? And the large language models have more or less solved that problem. And not just that, they've also added potential functionalities that robots really need to have. And there's another line in the Connecting the Dots video, which is really important. He talks about the problem in full self-driving has always been, okay, look, there's something there, just avoid it, right? Versus in robotics, that's not enough. Like, there's a difference between seeing a package and seeing a person. The package, you might have to, pick it up and move it somewhere, versus a person, of course, you're going to avoid. So you need to understand semantics, and the full self-driving space, at least for now, doesn't need that. Now, we've always been advocate of actually adding that also to the equation, because it is actually useful to know whether you are next to a school and whether there are children playing on the side or whether there are just adults standing on the side. Full self-drive, at least the 12.6 version that we're on hardware 3, is not very good at that. So whenever it sees something, it slows down, and it doesn't have that semantic understanding or the intent understanding. So those are the kinds of things that we believe that with semantics, with large language models attached to the robotic stack can actually help a lot. So having said all of that, we've always been an advocate of one of the big takeaways from last year's CVPR has been that it looks like the navigation problem is ubiquitous in robotics, meaning every robotics problem is in essence a navigation problem, and therefore FSD has a huge competitive advantage. Now, connecting the dots actually refutes that argument, says, no, that's not the case. You look at other companies, Figure and so on and so forth, they all actually are doing really well. They have the same capabilities, and having solved full self-driving doesn't give you an edge here. I think the jury's out on that one, but definitely what's needed is something like Grok, where you add semantics to the full self-drive stack or to the robotic stack, and I think Grok is in that sense a really important innovation that XAI has done, and hopefully will add to the Optimus stack, which is the ability to see things, understand things. Like you can use Grok, for example, for image generation, which tells me Grok really understands extremely well the semantics of things. And now connecting the dots says, yeah, but that's just not such a big deal. Figure has their own large language model. DeepSeek has it. Everybody has it. But we're not sure about that either. If you look at even now the models that are available, there's quite a difference. There's quite a difference in the image generation quality of Grok and GPT, for example. So Grok's better than GPT. GPT's better with text. So there are differences. And when it comes to actual products in the consumer space, being 90% good or being 99% good is going to make a difference. So therefore, we think that there's still quite a bit of an edge on that front. One thing that he talks about a lot is NVIDIA, and I think that's an important part where we completely agree. That's part why we're invested in NVIDIA, and that is the fact that NVIDIA is trying to do for the rest of the world what Tesla is doing for Optimus. So NVIDIA is trying to be sort of the AWS of robotics. They try to, deliver all the necessary, ingredients, model learning, the simulation in particular, which is a big deal for NVIDIA. And there's definitely something to be said about that. Now, whether that is a risk to Tesla or even a positive or neutral, that remains to be seen. But if you can simulate at scale walking, one of the things that connecting the dots mentions, and that we've seen with people like NVIDIA has spoken about this, and some of the papers we discussed in the last year have spoken about this, that you can teach a robot how to walk just by simulation at scale, and then do the real to sim. We've spoken about, let's say, the drone race, which I think was one of the big deals last year, the drone race by the University of Zurich, where they taught the drone to fly in sim and then did the real to sim and then beat humans in actual drone racing. So things like that show us that simulation really works. But we are in the same realm like in the full self-driving, which is, okay, it works for some problems, but it doesn't work for the whole stack. So we need real data, and then we come back to one of the main quotes from Sergey Levin a while ago, which is we need to have a fleet of robots out there and then start learning and then bootstrap themselves. So there's a chicken and egg problem, and that's where we think Tesla can play a big role, because that's exactly how they solved the full self-drive. They started with something, people were driving, and then they build on that. So the same thing can happen here. Now, of course, others can do that also, and it's a real race, and it requires iteration, and it requires a CEO. So our conclusion is that all these parts of the stack that connecting the dots mentions are important, are actually going to lead towards success if you excel in them. Some of them you have to be the best in the world, and some of them you have to understand how to assemble them, or how to take advantage. So, for example, if NVIDIA has a good simulation stack available, you can take advantage of that. You don't have to recreate Isaac Jim, but it's not going to be enough. But most importantly, I think, and here's the way we think about this. This is actually our conclusion. What Tesla needs to do in the robotic space is do a lot more iteration, or A/B testing, right? Because nobody really knows where this is going to go. Is this going to be a home robot type situation? Is this going to be a factory situation? Is this going to be the way we think about it is that most likely the humanoid robots will come to play first in all the kinds of situations where humans don't want to be, should not be, are scared of being. So difficult jobs, hard to do jobs, disgusting jobs, whether it's sorting garbage, that kind of thing, picking stuff on fields, construction, mining, de-escalating explosives, like those sort of things where humans should not be in the first place. Palmer Luckey has spoken about this also in the context of defense. So we believe that there's a lot of these types of situations that humanoids can be used, and the reason they will be used is, and now this is sort of the punchline. If we look at the Optimus space from a Clayton Christensen perspective, because that's what we do, we look at everything from a Clayton Christensen disruption perspective. So we don't use disruption as a sort of placeholder for everything like most people in the market, but we try to stay close to the script, which is the actual theorist who wrote about this. Clayton Christensen had a very clear understanding of what he means with disruption and why it's important and things like that. So one of the most important things that in the innovator's dilemma is the point that disruption is when you either create a new market or you go after a market that nobody else cares about, okay? And if you think about, for example, the humanoid robot, right? Do you want to have a robot that does your dishes? I don't think so. I'm not a big fan of all this, like, yeah, they're gonna clean my dishes and do my laundry, because that's not really a problem. And it doesn't take much time. Most people aren't even that neat anyway. They don't need to clean all the time. And it's just not worth $20,000 to have something at home. Plus, you don't want to have this thing at home in the first place. But what you're going to need is a humanoid robot taking care of elderly people, helping them to relieve themselves. You're going to need a robot to do very difficult jobs in factories. You're going to need a robot to do things along the lines of maybe go and pick up your groceries and things like that. Or, you have DoorDash at your door and the humanoid brings the stuff to your room. Things like that. Things you don't want to do, things that are difficult, things that are tiring, things that are take a lot of time. Things that take a lot of time and are dangerous. So we don't have a clear picture yet where these things are, but I think one thing we can say for sure is that that's the kind of market where you're going to succeed with an Optimus robot, because that market is not being served right now. For example, dangerous tasks. There's no market for robots that do dangerous tasks, because there just aren't any robots available to do that. And by the way, there's a lot of dangerous tasks that are not being done because there's no robot available. So for example, one of the most dangerous tasks we could think of right now on top of our heads is to fly to Mars. There just isn't a market for robots to fly to Mars, because we don't have rockets to go there that can bring a robot there yet, and we also don't have robots that can do it. So how about we make one that can do that? Now, you might think, well, fine, so how are you going to make money? But if you solve that problem, you might solve lots of other problems. A robot that can go on Antarctica and do research there and find, mine, or go into a mine and figure out what's going on when something's wrong and there's risks of collapse or things like that. So we have an opportunity here to deploy intelligence, human-level intelligence, in places where humans don't want to be or cannot be or should not be. And we would conclude with that. Like, the Optimus market is an embodiment of human intelligence in spaces where humans don't want to be, should not be, cannot be. That's the market. So it's the exact opposite of what most people are talking about, home cleaning and stuff like that. That's not the market. It's the market for human, like wherever you can deploy human intelligence, human-level intelligence, which is, we can have a whole episode of what that actually means. But let's just call it adaptive, ability to understand semantically what's going on, react, figure out how to check whether a coal mine is about to collapse or not. Things like that. We don't have robots that can do that right now. We have humans that could do that, but they shouldn't be in a place like that where they are sent into a coal mine that might or might not collapse. That's just not something you want to do. Or you don't want to send a human into a room that might explode because of a gas leak. But you can send a robot, and you might need human-level intelligence. Sometimes you don't, and then that's fine. If you don't need human-level intelligence, then you don't need Optimus. So the market is for places where human-level intelligence has to be deployed in embodied form, so you can't just send electromagnetic waves or some sort of or something like that. You might send a drone. By the way, the robot can be drone-like, and if we look at the defense market, the Ukraine war, there's a lot of robots being used there in places where humans cannot, should not, don't want to be, but where human-level intelligence is needed. So we are deploying them already in the defense context, and that's why I think it's incredibly exciting. This market is incredibly exciting for that reason. And as a conclusion, also, we believe that the last thing we want to say here is that it requires iteration, because we're not really sure where exactly that's going to be and how it's going to be deployed. We mentioned already the question of, for example, do you want to have an edge device intelligence, everything is on the device, or do you want to have a cloud-based intelligence, which means that you could have maybe a factory setting, where, let's say, we take that coal mine example, we could have some sort of geo-fenced connectivity where the robot talks to a central processing unit. We could have a Starlink-based situation where it's covered through satellites, and there's high-speed connection, things like that. So that needs to be iterated around, and of course, like we said many times, for that we need Elon time. And that's it. That's where we stand. Hopefully this helps. Again, kudos to Connect the Dots. I think really useful work that he did with this video, and inspiring. I think important to think about these things for us Tesla investors, clearly, because that is a big part of the thesis. It's not necessarily baked in the numbers right now, so we don't need this to work in order to justify the stock. I think FSD and energy is enough to get us to where we are today, and maybe a little higher also. But if we really want to go into the trillions of market cap, we need a successful Optimus, and we are on the path for that. And we think that Tesla is well positioned, because fundamentally it's going to come down to manufacturing, and that is not so easy. That is being thrown around like, the Chinese will figure it out. Not true. Even on the car side, they have, other than BYD, nobody has figured out how to compete with Tesla on cost and margins. Like nobody, actually. Even BYD hasn't figured that out. So the ability to produce something at scale with high reliability and decent margins, that's something that nobody has figured out yet. And that's going to be the main value creation in the end. Thank you.